cryonics, life insurance products. He's been selling financial products,
Mm-hmm.
drawing up. He's an agent, but you could tell he really believes what he preaches, though, because he puts his money where his mouth is. He doesn't just, schlep these products to other people. He owns a lot of financial life insurance for his own self. He wrote a book. He wrote the book in terms of
The
investment
affordable market.
strategy going forward,
I read it.
taking cryonics into account. Um, but he's a nice guy, and he'll give you the time of day. He'll tell you if his products are right for you, but usually he can find you something. That's Hey, out of all the different longevity strategies, this is the only one you can finance with life insurance. So if you're
Yeah.
struggling, what else am I going to do with my life insurance? Well, if you don't have a wife and kids, well, most people that have life insurance have some sort of family that they intend leaving it to. But for people that are divorced or unmarried or don't have dependents, why not? I mean, what else are you
All
going
right.
to use them for?
Yeah. I'm just caught between whether I want to put in uh put my money into life extending technologies such as CRISPR Cas9 or gene therapy when it comes along, or if I actually do become terminally ill, just to invest it uh, when the time comes. Yeah, we had a member of close friend of our family, a helper for our house, just came down with brain cancer this year, and it doesn't look good that she may. Well, maybe she'll make it through the year, but she has like only months to live now.
I'm often reminded of a quote from science fiction about the human condition and death. And there was a character named Colian Soren. He said, death is like a predator, it's stalking you. You could try to outrun it with doctors and medicine, but sooner or later, death is going to hunt you down and make the kill.
Mm-hmm. That's in the
What we are
research date.
attempting what we are attempting to do as cryonicists is really quite remarkable. For the
Mm-hmm.
first time, the human species actually has the technology to medically intervene in the dying process. And if we pull it off, which is a huge if,
Mm-hmm.
we will be among the first group of humans in the history of the species to successfully come back from the other side. That's quite a long shot. And to, to 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 state it to understate it, but really wrap your mind around the history of the human species. Nobody has ever successfully attempted to do what we're doing, which is medical time travel and coming back from the dead. Uh, but it's not entirely far fetched if you're a scientific person, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of good science backing it up. The problem is the human factor. Corporations that don't last,
Mm-hmm.
civilization that could nuke itself is prone to building things that could destroy itself.
Yeah, we're
Um,
dependent on the civilization underlying it.
but
That's
all that being said, I am convinced that as long as we don't drop the ball and this, as long as civilization itself does not totally collapse, I believe that all things being equal, even including climate change, we can move to higher ground. The water doesn't rise that quickly. The temperature doesn't go up that much overnight. I believe all things being equal, unless we press the big red button, I believe that we will eventually make it.
yeah.
Maybe not in the I'm a bit of more pessimistic about the time frame. People think that it'll happen definitely within 200 years, and most likely within 100. I believe the technology will take about 3 centuries to mature to the point where we can bring, us back from an elderly, death state to
Yeah,
reincarnated, put us in a younger body type of thing. But that's just me. I'm planning for a more pessimistic outcome. But
yeah,
that's a long time not to destroy civilization.
yeah.
There are other
What do we say to people who ask about what about the nature of consciousness between the time, or people like my own mom who might have religious objections, although I don't know why they would those they would have those objections, because I don't see anything in the text of biblical passages that prohibit it.
Yeah, there's definitely not a clause in the Bible that prohibits cryonics, but there is. You're not cheating death really because you're still dying. You're still going to die. You're going to die one way or the other. This is just not a life insurance policy, a life assurance policy.
Assurance.
You're 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 giving yourself. I can't answer those questions because
Okay.
I don't know if God exists. Nobody can really know for certain whether or not God does or does not exist or what form that may be. Whatever is out there, even if nothing is out there, the risk of doing nothing, your probability if you do nothing is your probability of success if you do nothing is zero. Your probability of doing something to intervene is infinitely greater than zero because any probability, even if it's a fraction of 1%, is infinitely higher than the number zero. But
Oh, it's recording.
that being said, um, I don't see where I don't see how wanting the Bible talks a lot about suicide and throwing God's gift of life away. It doesn't say anything about using doctors or medicines or anything like that to extend one's life. That would just be wanting to preserve and cherish. Besides, in the grand scheme of things, you're going to die anyway, even if we do get the biological
Hey,
longevity.
Jason, what do
Yeah.
you know about Hakutua?
What?
What do you know about Hakutua? Dan loves the Hakutua. It's been on that thing, don't you?
Anyway, the universe is going to die eventually, so there is that.
On that
Yeah,
too.
that shit gang
So do
shit
you
is
have
real.
a so Jason, do you have a cryonics policy with Rudy or someone, or are you just waiting till you actually need cryonics? Because I'm kind of in the latter camp right now.
I'm signed up with CI,
Okay.
um, but I did not go through Rudy Hoffman. I might buy one of his products eventually, but no, no, I don't currently have a policy with him at present.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to know. Yeah, there's someone in our local area. First name is Alan, but he's just so affiliated with the cryonics. He's come to some of our space meetings, and um, yeah, I might want to get in touch with him again.
Most
Man,
of the people here, though, are agnostic or atheists. So if that's your belief, there really is no downside in terms of your fear of the wrath of God is
yeah,
concerned, which makes the barrier to entry even less.
yeah. I mean, I figure, yeah, agnostic or spiritualist. I figure it should cover both sides. There shouldn't. Uh, if there is something to it, there's nothing wrong with us trying to get there by our own means. I don't see any problem with it. So,
The
okay.
thing is,
It kind of goes back to Pascal's wager back in the day,
Pascal's,
when the idea that to accept the grace of God because you have an insured policy of going to heaven at that time frame seemed like a plausible idea to do that. More of a secular time frame now. If you have the financial wherewithal, going cryonics isn't. There's not, the downside is that maybe it doesn't work, maybe it never happens, but at least you've given yourself the only. You can't win unless you don't buy a ticket, kind of thing.
yeah, that's true. All right, cool.
yeah, the same logic that applies to Pascal's wager applies to cryonics in the scientific field of modernity.
And another analogy that I see from your cryonics discussion is the whole idea of trying to go renewable. You know, the idea that we, I mean, it never has failed to occur to me that there's never been an example of a civilization that's had a financial wherewithal to have a middle class without burning a shitload of fossil fuel. And that model of fossil fuel, burn fossil fuel, have middle class, is so strongly ingrained and enforced in this society that this idea that we can turn the ship around towards a renewable, sustainable economy is probably as challenging as the idea of hoping that we'll figure out how to sustain human life after death.
You know what cryonicists are in relation to the futurist society? Cryonicists are the astronauts of the Minnesota Futurists, because we are undertaking medical time travel to the future, possibly hundreds, maybe even 1,000 years. If ever there was an astronaut force or an astronaut corps of human beings, human explorers, time travelers, we are it. There is nothing else by comparison to, people like Hank and myself and others who are preparing for this journey, not to outer space, but a far greater adventure to the future itself, and to find out what will ultimately become of mankind. We are the intrepid explorers. Whether or not we make it there, we might be like the Columbia space shuttle. We might blow up on the launch pad, but at least we're going to try, damn it. We're going to try to get to the destination. I just want to say, I'm not a cryonicist and a futurist. I'm actually on the medical committee. I actually put people into cryostasis on more than one, and continue to do so far into the future as long as I'm capable therein. In fact, I'm pursuing becoming a licensed paramedic in the state of Minnesota to that end. But I've toured the cryo facilities and seen, as has Carol, and we're building up a network, and so I'm heavily involved, not just in the organization that we started from nothing, but I'm heavily into the technical medical side of transitioning a body into cryostasis.
Well, you were actively involved with Hank's situation, weren't you, Jason?
I was very hands-on with Hank's situation, to put it mildly.
Yeah. I recall that very well.
Which is a service I'm happy to provide. Any of you that have excess funds, please feel free to make a donation to MC. If you guys want to make a difference, the greatest real world difference you can make is to donate funds to MCRR, Minnesota Cryonics Rapid Response. We are the logistical transportation link from point of death to the cryovats, the ultimate cryo, your
Facility.
final place, yeah, your
A
facility,
liquid nitrogen vat.
cryostat, yeah.
Eric.
Yeah, I wanted to get in. Yeah, one important bit before we get to the main topic is, well, probably the most important thing I saw this last week was a report in Science that has discovered that, well, I hope everyone knows by now that there's a version of H5N1 bird flu that's endemic in America now, largely in dairy cattle and milk and other animals and birds. But now they found that so far it's only the few cases that transmitted to humans have been relatively non-serious. But a report in Science I think it was this week or a week or two ago that shows that it only needs one mutation in the hemagglutinin surface protein for it to become much more able to infect human mucosal membranes and therefore be potentially lethal. And so bottom line, I hope everybody's stocked up on all your high quality N95 masks while they're still relatively cheap and available.
Yeah, the mutation will allow human-to-human transmission.
Yes, unfortunately. And my only comment on that, besides what's in the literature, is it seems like these some variant of the AlphaFold series by DeepMind should be useful in predicting such mutations and maybe how to cope with them.
Yeah, unfortunately, the person who might be running the medical part of the cabinet is proposing to eliminate the NIH, National Institute of Health, which is one of the main things to deal with.
That's serious? Has he actually said that Robert Kennedy, RFK?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's sincere, but I wish they'd get somebody with credentials.
Yeah, I wish they'd do that for a lot of those positions.
Eric, I want you to know that I now have 80 of those masks. And Pam said that if I bring any more into the house, she'd kill me herself.
Yeah,
So,
well, when those 80 run out, and remind her what she said.
I will.
You know, I don't know. It could be a couple of years. Who knows?
Eric,
Anybody who wants to buy a pack of 50, I can get them for $10 if you. I offered to sell a whole bunch of them. I myself have got about 600 N95s now, so
Well,
when they would,
what do they look like, Jason?
oh, they're flat and foldable.
Okay, they're the fold-in front ones.
Yeah, they're not.
They're not the double elastic?
No, they're not the double elastic ones.
Okay, which it looks like David is just about to. Okay.
David's going to model one for us. Yeah. Email me some and I'll mail you a check.
That's the kind that I like. And I still
So basically, we're expecting the next global pandemic. It
I'll
sounds
tell
like.
you the model number that I got.
We lost Eric.
Yeah.
Are the N95s, is there a 3M version of the N95s?
Yeah, the 3M version is the real version. The Chinese ones aren't as good.
They're the Chinese kind, but they're still they still meet the 3M N95 specifications. Nothing, but realistically, if we're going to go through another pandemic, you're going to need N95s on a massive scale. You could, if anything, you could double up your N95s and do it that way to add even more protection. But
the protection is not the question through the mask, Jason. The problem with the masks is the seal around your face, especially if you have a beard. The leakage in the side, the mask material is a fine filter. It's an excellent filter. The specs on the filter material are something like 99.99% efficient at 0.3 micron and larger. The problem is that you're going to get leakage around the edges of 1 to 5%.
Guess you'll have to shave.
Yeah.
And on top of that, using my skills as a do-it-yourself MacGyver, I was able to take those cheap box fans that you can pick up at any home department store with a couple of rolls of duct tape and some furnace filters and pre-filters. I was able to take and make an air filtration system you could plug into any wall and filter out most of the free-floating viral particles in the air.
That's true.
We should
but the
get
furnace
started.
filters are roughly 99% efficient. These are 100 times better, except they leak around the edges. You could put them on with duct tape, I suppose.
Yeah, probably won't work well for us with beards. The model I got, which I researched on consumerlab.org.com, which is a pay thing, and also my doctor's office uses it. He uses, and my primary doctor. He also has a doctorate in immunology. So it's a 3M model 9205 plus. And as far as I know, they're the best unless something better has come out.
Well, we should start on the presentation.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, has anyone been through military tear gas training?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the whole trick is it works wonderfully. But if you have the slightest leak in your mask, you're going to have a rough time in the tear gas chamber. Yep.
Yeah.
Everybody has a rough time in the tear gas chamber.
Yeah, the trick is to get on quickly but securely.
Us bearded guys may have to shave, to get a reasonably good fit. Yeah, unfortunately.
Eric, question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Were you here last week for
my
presentation on AlphaFold?
Yes.
2 weeks ago.
I remember, I think I congratulated you. Nice job.
Well, I just wasn't sure based on your comment whether you had seen it or not.
Yes. I read up on that been following that for some time since they came out with it. Yeah. And I saw yours.
So Tom, I'm going to record today, and I'm assuming you're going to present your own videos?
Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to start the presentation on human longevity. See if I can share it. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes. Oh, and we should all mute.
Yeah, I don't think I'll bother hiding the slides on the left there. I'll just stick with the way it is, if that's okay. Okay, what I'm going to talk about human longevity is considering these things I have listed here on this first slide. What our current maximum lifespan and life expectancy are two different things. What's being done currently to increase them and what can be done in the future to increase them. And then toward the end, I want to consider why do we want to live longer, and should we even increase our lifespan? There's some people who argue that we shouldn't. So the first slide, here's where we are now. In 2022, if you look at this graph on the right, it's kind of small. I don't know if you can see it. This graph goes from 1980 to 2022, and it shows life expectancy at
Yeah,
birth.
Tom,
I think,
Yes,
Tom, press F5 and you can get the full screen, I think.
that size font is
So
going to have to be
we
blown up for
stumbled
us
on
to
this.
Yeah,
read.
You're
yeah.
doing
Hi,
basic science
do
of
some
how
kind
to
of full
study
screen
everything.
or hide the
I think it's the
sidebar.
F5 key.
The United States has probably the highest healthcare cost in the world.
something just happened.
Yeah, almost, I think,
I got to get out of
5
this.
to
Hold
10
on.
times what they are in Sweden and Norway and most other highly civilized countries. But in the US, and I think these numbers hold up pretty much across the board.
There we go. Found what got triggered there accidentally.
Yeah, your first slide was quite readable, but the second slide, the font is too small.
Yeah, if you can do some kind of full screen or hide that sidebar and use page down or arrow down for your screens, that would work.
Okay. This graph on the right here goes from 1980 to 2022, and it shows that at the end there, the U.S., which is the green line, has a average life expectancy of 77.5 years. The males are actually 74.8 and females are 80.2. U.S. life expectancy has fallen behind all the other developed countries that are on this graph. And the ones that are on the graph, if you're interested, are Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland, and the UK, as well as the US. So it shows back in 1980, we were still below average, but we were close to the others. We've fallen behind kind of ever since. And we had a big dip in 2021. Since then, we've been coming back. And that big dip was due mostly to our poor COVID response. The current gap, according to 2023 data, which isn't on this graph, between the US and the UK is almost 3 years. But the year before that, 2022, was 4.7 years. So we've started to catch up. But we're still doing worse than most of these other developed countries as far as life expectancy. According to the Bloomberg American Health Institute at Johns Hopkins, Bloomberg School of Public Health, which produced the US versus UK study, the difference between the two countries is due to preventable causes, and the four that they listed were heart disease, drug overdose, firearm violence, and motor vehicle crashes. That accounted for virtually all of the 3% difference. So anyway, if we solve these problems with these preventable causes, we will add a few years to our average life expectancy, but it still won't get us close to our maximum lifespan. And our maximum lifespan, the general consensus, it's currently about 120 years. According to demographers, it's anywhere from 115 to 126 years. But most researchers agree it's about 120. The oldest human that's been verified is Jeanne Calment. She was born and died in Arles, France. She lived to be 122 years and 164 days old. She died in 1997, so there hasn't been anyone older since. Some people claim there isn't any fixed limit, and that might be true, but the current limit is about 120. No one's really exceeded that, except by a couple years maybe. So, what's the deal with people who live so old? You've heard of the blue zones. There are some areas where people tend to live older than in other areas. These centenarians tend to have a longer health span as well as a longer lifespan. That means they're healthy until the end, pretty much. The onset of age-related disease occurs later in life for them. So what they have a shorter morbidity span. They're pretty healthy until they finally get sick and then die fairly quickly after that. Probably, or at least partly, a reason for this is our medical system. Once people pass age 100, they usually aren't given the care that would be given to someone age 50, perhaps, for the same condition. Because the medical insurance or whatever decides, well, maybe they're not worth it. Or it's just old age. It's expected. So it's possible that if they got the same care, the same kind of conditions when they're over 100 that other people would get when they're younger, that they could live past 122. But so far, no one has done that. Any questions so far? Good, because I have a lot to cover. Okay, so what are we doing to increase the human lifespan? Lifespan is different from life expectancy. Okay, the life expectancy is how old the average person is going to live to be. Lifespan has a maximum. That's 120 years or so that we're looking at right now. So what we're doing to try to increase that lifespan, some say the next step is to increase it to 150 years. Then after that, 1,000 years, and then after that, possibly immortality. But that's some ways off. But we're learning more about aging mechanisms. And one of the studies, for example, is an experiment that was done with single-celled yeast, which has two routes for aging. One is nucleolar aging, which is decline in the stability of the DNA in the cells. And the other is mitochondrial aging, in which the cells lose mitochondria, which are basically the engines of the cells. They supply most of the energy that the cells need. By manipulating the expression of regulators that determine which genes are active, the experimenters could turn on or off either of those two aging routes. And by generating sustained oscillations between the two types of cellular degeneration in the individual cells, they prevented the cells from following either of the two aging routes. Basically, the cell couldn't complete an aging route, and it therefore lived longer. It didn't age.
With what cells?
These are these yeast cells.
Okay.
Single-celled yeast. The lifespan of the cells increased by 82%. Since the two regulators that they were looking at in this study have counterparts in humans, this appears to be a promising avenue of research. So this kind of genetic what you might say jiggling of how the DNA is expressed, or the RNA, and how the proteins are produced, has possibilities to increase the actual lifespan of humans. So now the question is, what can we do? What's being done now? Right now, there's not much actually being done to increase our lifespan, but more of the research right now is going to improving our life expectancy and our healthiness until age 20, or at least over 100. So that's, in other words, most of the research is going into narrowing the gap between our health span and our lifespan. So we want to be healthy as long as we can. One of the pioneers in the genomic research that's associated with this is Dr. J. Craig Venter. And he was an employee of the NIH when he started out, and he made some discoveries. One is express sequence tags. And since then, he's founded several research companies and institutes. One of them is called Human Longevity Incorporated. So I want to show you a video. Actually, it's about a 45-minute video. I'm going to show you just the last 8 or 9 minutes of it. When he's talking about the name of the video is called On Human Origins and the Future of Humanity. So I have to switch over now. Pull that up. Just a couple things about terms he was using. A genotype refers to an organism's genetic makeup. So it's essentially the set of genes that it has. While a phenotype is the observable physical characteristics of that organism. And that's determined by the interaction between its genotype and environmental factors. So in simpler terms, a genotype is a genetic code, and the phenotype is how that code is manifested physically. Okay, so every individual has both a unique genotype and a unique phenotype. So analyzing both these things for each person is what's really required to determine what might be going on with them and what interventions might be needed to make sure that they don't come down with some debilitating disease, or if they already have one and not aware of it. For example, they might have tumors and feel perfectly healthy, but these tumors might be a high-grade tumor that will fairly quickly make them very ill and possibly kill them. So the type of imaging that he was talking about is one of the things that can help early detection and prevention. Someone had a hand up a little earlier. Was that you, Carol?
Yes. Two questions. One from way earlier and one from now. He keeps talking about reading X-rays and MRIs is going to get really inexpensive because it's going to be done by AI. However, AI is not going to decrease the cost of an MRI machine or the fact that it requires, in some cases, hours of time on the part of medical professionals and the patient. I mean, there's a big irreducible cost there.
Yes, but as he said, the biggest cost is the radiologist that looks and interprets the images.
Right. But it's never going to get as dirt cheap as a single X-ray.
Yes, that's true. But these are much better diagnostic tools. X-rays can't tell you a lot. For example, it can't, as he said, can't distinguish between a cyst and a tumor.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I'm just,
And X-rays cause mutations too, which MRIs don't as far as
it could, yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
well, my other question from long ago, is anybody looking at animal studies? There are a ton of mammals who have short lifespans that are very much genetically built in. Gerbils, mice, rats, guinea pigs, those guys. And you look at one of these critters as it passes into its death spiral, it will go from perfectly healthy to looking terrible. The fur is falling out in patches and the poor creature is staggering around its cage, and something triggers at the age of 3 or 4 or 9, I think, in the case of guinea pigs, and boom, the creature is aging over the course of weeks to death. It would seem to me that there's something to be studied there, and studied on a much faster scale than humans.
Yes. I'm most of what I've been looking at, it has to do with scientists looking at long-lived creatures such as hydras or planarian worms, which are essentially immortal, and trying to figure out why they are. But
humans, like guinea pigs and gerbils, appear to have a trigger.
Yes.
That comes in and then it's rapidly downhill.
Yeah, as in the study I mentioned a little earlier about yeast, there can be more than one trigger. One is corruption, you might say, of the DNA sequencing within the cells. And that often occurs when the cell gets older and has divided a number of times and has lost a number of its telomeres. And so the ends can fray or so to speak, of the strands, and then they don't divide or reproduce cleanly and get corrupted. That's one path. Another that happened in the yeast that I mentioned is loss of mitochondria after it divides. So there's a number of ways that this can happen, this kind of deterioration. But one of the more promising one is looking at how telomerase is created, which is what repairs the telomeres and can maintain a good number of them at the ends of the strands. So I'll be getting into that a little bit later. Okay. I want to go on to the next slide here. If I can pull that up. Let's see, where's my share? Okay, is that shared? Can everyone see that?
No, I
Just
can't
see
see
you.
it.
Oh,
Just see
Okay.
you.
Let me, there it is. Okay, here we go. All right, let's see. Okay, so this is an example of how lifespan can be increased by genetic manipulation. In a research on earthworms, these researchers focused on DAF2, an insulin receptor gene, which affects the insulin growth factor, the IGF-1, the signaling pathway for that factor. So what this IGF-1 does is regulates growth, reproduction, and longevity. And the lifespan of a number of animals can be increased by reducing this IGF-1 signaling. This can apply possibly to humans as well as other animals. These worms were left to become reproductively mature before they initiated this IGF-1 knockdown, which is manipulating the DAF2 receptor gene, which affects that signaling pathway. So once they reduce the IGF-1 signaling in these earthworms, the worms lived more than 2 times longer than their offspring were more fit and prolific. So this is another way to increase lifespan. It works in these worms by affecting the production of this IGF-1. Question is whether it can also work in humans. So basically what happened is switching off the function of these certain genes in the adult worms increased their longevity and also did not adversely affect their reproduction. In fact, their offspring were healthier than normal and also continued to produce healthy offspring of their own. So this just
Did they have?
Go ahead.
Did they have a reduced IGF-1 signaling mechanism?
Yes, that's what they did. That's what that IGF-1 knockdown is.
Oh, the offspring.
Oh, the offspring.
Did they inherit?
No. Not as far as I know. This had to be initiated by the researchers. But the offspring were healthy and they produced healthy offspring of their own. They didn't live longer though. So this shows that longevity is not just a matter of repairing cellular or chromosomal damage, which is what most people think about as far as what happens with aging and causes of cancer and that kind of thing. So there's several ways that may be applicable to humans that can be used to increase our lifespan. So you may have noticed that I put references at the bottoms of most of these screens if you're interested, so you'll be able to look at this stuff yourself if you go through the recording. Okay, next screen. So the question comes up, is immortality possible? We know that it's possible to increase lifespan of certain organisms, and we found some ways to do it. Some plants we know live to be 10,000 years old or more. There are some trees that are more than 10,000 years old. There are a few bristlecone pines that are, for example. Hydra and some species of planarians, which are animals, invertebrates, are also considered immortal. They basically don't die, at least from natural causes. A hydra is kind of interesting. It's mostly made up of stem cells. And so it can regenerate any part of its body, including its head and the place where it ingests food and so forth. Normally, they reproduce asexually by budding, so they basically clone themselves. But under certain conditions that are usually stressful, they can also reproduce sexually by producing sperm and fertilizing the buds, the eggs. But if they do, they age and die. So if they produce asexually, they live forever. If they produce sexually, they die. Normally, they do not exhibit senescence or senescence. They don't get old. They just stay as they are. They like humans and most other animals, as far as I know, in the world, they have these telomeres on the ends of their strands. It's the TTA-GGG repeated many, many times. And they contain telomerase to preserve the telomeres. So if they do divide cells and lose some telomeres, they get added back in via the telomerase. And this high turnover rate of stem cells is probably what sustains the telomerase activity. That's what keeps them producing enough telomerase to restore the telomeres. They also have this FOXO gene, and I didn't write down what it stands for, but in humans, the FOXO3 gene is associated with extreme longevity, the supercentenarians. So that's another gene that is associated with good longevity. So these hydras are interesting to study. Basically, they're able to restore the telomeres because they have a lot of telomerase, and they can regenerate any part of their body because they have a lot of stem cells. Now, humans are a little different. They're more complicated. They can't regenerate all the parts of their bodies. Tom, did you have a question? Okay.
Carol does.
Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, this FOX0, or is it FOXO?
I believe it's FOXO.
Okay, this FOXO gene, are we saying that that is not a part of the normal human genome?
It is. It's in humans also. In fact, humans have 4 variants of it. And the FOXO3 is the one that's associated with extreme longevity.
Oh. So there are 3 variants of the gene and only one is associated with human longevity.
4 variants, yeah. And FOXO3 is the one that's most closely associated with longevity.
Okay.
Okay. Going on. I want to talk a little bit about telomeres. I think many of you might know something about them, but basically they act like protective caps on the ends of the chromosomes, and that prevents them from fraying or from fusing their ends with other chromosomes or being damaged during cell division. So it maintains the chromosomal stability and protects the integrity of the genetic information within the cells. So these telomeres shorten slightly with each cell division, these TTA GGG groups, which is taurine, arginine, and forget what the G stands for. It's one of the four enes anyway that make up our genetic material. Oh yeah, A is adenine, T is taurine, G is guanine, and there's also a C that's cytosine.
Cytosine. Yeah.
So in fact, the complementary sequence to this TTA-GGG is AATCCC. And that's probably what the telomerase uses to repair or add on more telomeres to the end of the chromosomes. So that's the structure of these telomeres. And if they do shorten slightly, if some of these sequences are lost and there's too many of them lost, eventually this does lead to cell senescence. The cell ages and basically dies when these telomeres are too short and the cell can't replicate effectively anymore. Okay. The main function of these telomeres is to ensure proper cell division, and they naturally shorten, as I mentioned, with each cell division. That is, they lose one or more of these TA-GGG sequences when the cell divides. Okay, and I see, Carol, you still have your hand up. Is that another question?
Nope, forgot to take it down. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, we're zooming through these slides pretty well. Okay, now I have a couple videos, and I think I have time to show them because it's not 11 o'clock yet. So these are each about 23 minutes long. The first one is Dr. Brad Perkins, and he talks about synthetic life to human longevity. This was made in 2017, so it's a little old. But he talks about the DNA being the firmware for an organism. Well, actually, firmware was my term. It's like I don't know, like Tom, you might have a concept of what you think firmware is. It's what you use to boot up the thing.
Operating system?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Yeah. So learning to translate the DNA code into it leads to an understanding of the health and diseases. So this is done mostly nowadays with machine learning, using vast amounts of data that we've been able to generate over the last probably 20 years or so, as far as what we know about different organisms and different DNA. So he talks also about disruption of medical procedures. So let me see if I can pull this up. I have to stop sharing this. Which is kind of enlightening now. So no, we're not done.
We can have a few minutes of conversation and then
Okay, so I just want to show the last few minutes of that interview too, because he talked about some of the risks associated with this kind of research. And I want to, at the end of our session today, I want to talk about some of the pros and cons also. So be ready for that. I don't see any questions right now. So I can, oh, yeah, go ahead, Dean. I can't hear you.
I stay muted. What the heck is a genome? When did genome become gnome?
I don't know. Yeah, he always pronounces it genome.
Yeah, well, I'm going to send him a copy of Merriam-Webster because
I've heard it pronounced both ways. He's not the only one that pronounces it that way either. I've run into a couple people who pronounce it that way in my research.
Yeah, well, I have genomes in my garden.
Yeah, the ones with the little hats. Yeah. Okay.
May very well be something like aluminum and aluminium.
Aluminium, yeah, maybe it's
Yeah,
British.
it's a British. It's
Oh, and I love aluminium,
British.
by the way.
It's a British thing.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to show one other video here now, and at the beginning of his talk, Dr. Perkins mentioned Aubrey, who was also speaking there. That's Dr. Aubrey de Grey. Now, this is a guy who's a little controversial, but he's always an entertaining speaker. His personal life is kind of a shambles, and he's done some things that some people do not approve of, but he's kind of a provocative speaker, and he addresses this issue of life extension. He's very passionate about it.
Tom,
So, go ahead. Who's that?
Tom, you still have a hand up.
I can't see I can't see a hand. Is that Stan?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another person that's involved with this study is David Sinclair, and he describes that he talks about the epigenome a lot, about the controlling managerial level of genetics, and I haven't seen that discussion come up in your talk. I wonder if that's something that is not really considered valid anymore, or is this still?
No, I didn't run across much about epigenetics. I know that it's an inheritable trait over several generations, but it's not a permanent trait. It kind of affects how the genes are expressed, and it can do that over a few generations, but it's not a permanent effect, as I understand it.
Well, he uses the analogy of a CD that's been scratched up, and he claims that it's possible to clean the CD off and to sort of get restored in terms of your genomic makeup and so on through the epigenetic process. I don't know.
Yeah, since that process does affect how the genes are expressed, that could have that effect if it's done right. Carol, go ahead.
Yes, is this David Sinclair, the Australian one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm familiar with his writing.
Harvard professor.
There's just an awful lot of David Sinclairs.
Yeah, well, there's a lot about him. This one, he's the most prominent of the mainstream gerontologists now. He's all over the place on the YouTube. And
well, I just want to make sure we were talking about the same guy.
Oh yeah, there's massive evidence for the epigenetics as being a major factor in aging, but he keeps swearing that that this information is not really lost, that it's stored somehow elsewhere in the body or other cells, but he never really explicates how. That's maddeningly frustrating. And also, well, the big, huge sort of negative article about him in the Wall Street Journal just 2 days ago, with 5 December, about the failure of all of his companies, several that he started, including one that he sold to GlaxoSmithKline for over $600 million, and they just, after they worked on it a while, they gave up and closed the company, challenging the validity of.
I've heard that he has detractors, that he's a snake oil salesman and so forth.
He's legit. I think he's like Rick Kurzweil and Elon Musk, brilliant guys and legit, sincere, but they're just probably overly optimistic in and about both like how soon their research. It's incredibly complicated to get full credit. Just astoundingly complex if you were trying to read the primary literature. And but yeah, this one he started several companies, and none of them have come up with anything that is shown to actually slow or reverse human aging. Although he does have strong claims in his publications in Nature and Science and other major prestigious journals, claiming he's extended the life of mice 30% and so on. And he keeps saying real soon now, just like Elon Musk, fully automated cars driving almost every year. It says it's 1 or 2 years from that ahead, but it never seems to get there.
Kind of like controlled fusion. That's been 20
Yeah.
years away for the last 20 years.
Tom, you're next.
I would say his understanding of the genome is far better than his understanding of business practices.
You're talking about Sinclair?
Yeah. Well,
and didn't he do some very serious work on type 2 diabetes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Blindness, glaucoma, and so on. Claims he's restored sight to mice.
Okay.
He's going to do it with humans.
I have another video to show, and this is Aubrey DeGray, who I said is kind of a character, but it's what he talks about is very relevant to what this presentation is about. So let's see, there it is. Let me stop this. I think I stopped it. Okay. Okay, I see one hand up, so go ahead, Dean.
All right, yeah, I'm unmuted. Yep. A real quick technical question. Does anyone else here have audio dyslexia among all the other kinds of dyslexia?
Well, he's speaking very fast, so yeah.
He is the kind of guy on beautiful YouTube that I turn down to 0.75 speed. And then I also turn on, and the other technical question is, would anybody object to having closed captioning on? Because I do everything with closed captioning pretty much.
That was on.
It was on?
Yeah.
I
It was on my screen.
Oh, well, yeah, you can turn it on. I can't, But anyway, I watch it, but I know we have time constraints and all that. But yeah, if you don't have audio dyslexia, every time Siri says turn left, I hear turn right, period. Yeah. A lot of hours wasted, but yeah, it's a real thing. Anyway, yeah, that was that. And then the other thing was why I keep flashing back to my ant farms, because I kept buying more acreage and trying to keep my ants alive and keep them from, because I took such good care of them that they were eating each other, and I had to get a bigger and bigger ant farm and finally release them in the backyard. And yeah, so, but he sort of answered that with his eugenics, oh, well, we just stop people from having children. We select who has children, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's playing Darwin, but I'm not totally against that. But anyway, very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I still have 4 slides left in my presentation. I'm going to try to get to the one where we discuss those types of issues.
I'm going to try to lower my hand. Oh,
Eric, go ahead. Eric.
I'm going to argue. Well, first of all, basically argue without going into there's massive evidence on this. In a nutshell, he's right, and David Sinclair and other. It can be done slow and then reverse aging. There's nothing in physics that prevents it. We're not a closed system, but it because the public does not and never will understand it, they'll have to be maybe pay a lot of the taxes to solve it. They probably never will understand how difficult and complex and expensive it will be. I'm for benevolent lying, overly optimism of Sinclair and Ray Kurzweil and others. I like to argue by analogy with a great movie I saw, a 1999 movie with Robin Williams was the main character, called Jacob the Liar, and it was about some guys in a concentration camp in Poland in World War II, and it's the fact that if you weren't just killed outright gas or something, if you're just being overworked and underfed and so on and disparaged and abused, that the ones who just gave up hope, and they tended to just die of various causes much sooner. And some of the ones that just had just endless grit did survive on almost unspeakable conditions. And he sort of realized that, he saw that. And so he spread disinformation on purpose. He was one of the prisoners, and he said he'd been in the commandant's office and heard on the German military radio channel that the Russian army was only 40 miles away, and if they could just hold on, and hang in there somehow, they could be rescued. And while it was overly optimistic, eventually the Russian army did get there, and a lot of them did survive that would not have otherwise. So I think it's morally justified to be overly optimistic.
Okay, Jason.
It triggered another memory. Another Robin Williams film that I think spoke very potently of life and of death is, I think it was called Millennial Man, where Robin Williams is born as a robot, and his one great wish is to become a human, a man, and so this robot, this artificial intelligence, is born as a kind of a domestic servant robot for a family, and he, throughout the entire movie, it's his journey as an AI robot in his quest to become more human. And I won't spoil it for you, but I found it to be an incredibly emotional, interesting movie as a futurist, because it's set in the future and it talks about artificial intelligence, and it's been done before with Data and Star Trek: The Next Generation, but this is a slightly different take on that. Thank you.
Name the movie again.
Millennial Man.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, I want to go on to my next slide here. Let me share the screen. If I can get my cursor in the right spot. I just lost my cursor. I've got to move some stuff around here because it keeps getting obscured.
I'm sorry, it was called Bicentennial Man. Bicentennial Man.
Oh, that sounds.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Especially the ending.
All right. It's not clear if human mortality is really possible, but there are some technologies that could help. I'm going to just go over these quickly. There was a discussion about cryonics before the presentation here. You want it bigger. Let's see. Well, I'm not going to be on the slide for very long.
All right. I think it's F5, but I got my best reading glasses on, so.
The idea that the dead can be cryonics is the idea that the dead can be revived in the future with medical advances, and we know that at least people who have been members of this group for more than a couple years know that Hank was hoping this will work. You may find out. Brain chips is the idea of replacing parts of the brain with chips to create kind of a cyborg. That could be better hearing or better vision or whatever. You know, people kind of recoil at that idea, but when you think about it, many of us are cyborgs already. We have artificial hips, artificial knees, stents, pacemakers. So there's a number of ways that we're already cyborgs. So that's not such a strange idea. Telomerase treatments. Scientists are developing treatments to help maintain the telomeres, which are, we already discussed them, they're caps that help protect cells when they divide. But humans are not simple life forms. And telomeres are also associated with cancer. So we have to be careful that one of these therapies, such as the telomerase treatments, does not have side effects such as creating cancer. Now, it could be that we'll easily be able to treat cancer in another 10, 20 years or whatever. Right now, it's still pretty challenging. And then there's brain uploading, which people have discussed, which is the idea of loading the brain into a computer and live forever in the machine or as a machine. Well, I personally believe that's not really you. It would be a ghost of you, a simulacrum, but it wouldn't be you. Maybe the closest thing you could come is to create a biological clone of you, you know, a meat package, and then downloading the previously uploaded memories back into this clone. So this other body would have similar inputs to what you would have, and chemical reactions and all that kind of stuff. But that does not seem like a feasible thing in the near future, at least. Some of these other technologies are closer. So the most promising ways right now to extend human lifespan, and who knows what the promise of cryonics is, you know, will people who are going into the deep freeze ever come out? We don't know at this point. And if they can, will they be able to be revived and be healthy? But right now, what we're looking at is genetic engineering, which is a lot of what we've been talking about so far today, which can improve health span and lifespan and reduce the morbidity span, which is the disease portion of the end of your life. So you want to reduce morbidity, increase health, and live long. Cybernetics can also improve and extend the quality of life. I already talked about artificial limbs and joints and things like that, but nanobots circulating throughout your body can help to monitor and improve what's going on in your bodies. So that's another way to increase human longevity and health. And if you combine these two things, genetic engineering, cybernetics, you get something called transhumanism. And this is probably, I think, what's most likely to lead to 100,000 or 1,000-year lifespans or more. A lot of the people in this area tend to think of it in kind of 3 steps. Right now, we're at about 120 years maximum lifespan. Next step is 150. And as Aubrey DeGray was talking, the next step after that could come fairly soon on, as far as who's eligible for it, would be the 1,000-year lifespan. And then past that, maybe immortality or something close to it. So transhumanism can become kind of an ethical or moral question. I mean, if you do enough genetic engineering and cybernetics, are you still human? My impression at this point is that, yeah, you still are. But it can be kind of a slippery question. And the other point is that important? We'll have descendants who aren't like us, but does that make them bad? I don't think so. Tom, you have your hand up.
A couple of weeks ago, I did a presentation that's centered on a book called Longevity by Dr. Peter Akins, and he adds a fourth thing here: proper diet, proper exercise, proper sleep, and
Lifestyle's important.
avoiding the catastrophes that lead to death. Most people go along on kind of a straight line, and then something happens, and boom, nowadays. And the thing to do is to avoid that bump. Or if you hit it, do something about it. Don't just lay there on the floor and say, oh my, I fell. I must be going to die now. No, get up.
Yeah.
Do your exercise. Eat good food. And
Yeah.
Just another word about transhumanism. Many of the transhumanists view the elimination of aging and disease as the primary goal of transhumanism. So this could theoretically lead to a much longer lifespan, bordering on immortality. And of course, what you mentioned also, Tom, is lifestyle choices. Drinking's another bad one. It turns out that most people say drinking is worse for you than we thought. I mean, resveratrol, wine is not probably the best way to get it. Technological advances in transhumanism, extending lifespan involves advancements in biotechnology, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, and other such technologies. And they're all being developed pretty quickly. So this type of advance is not far off. Some argue that achieving true immortality through technology may be impossible due to fundamental biological constraints and ethical concerns regarding potential societal implications of a drastically extended lifespan exist. And I want to discuss that in the last slide we have. So I have 2 slides left, and we're almost out of time, but if you have some quick comments, Carol?
I'd like to harken back to the biological definition of human, which would be, are they the same species as we are? Which would basically boil down to, can we reproduce with them?
Right.
do you mean,
If
transhuman?
we alter our genome enough, would we be able to still reproduce with each other? I don't know.
Yes.
That's a good question. But maybe we could create an Aquaman to live
Why would we want to
under
if we
the
could live
ocean
forever?
and things like that. I saw a hand up earlier, but it's down now, so I'll try to finish up here. So why do we want to live longer? I mean, I'd say there's a few reasons. We have a biological imperative that's ingrained in us to live to age 30 or even age 40 in order to preserve the species, to reproduce, and raise our young, because our young don't mature very quickly. We want to raise them till they're able to reproduce. So that's 30 to 40 years. So I think this biological imperative kind of explains, in part at least, why we want to cling to life, even after age 40. The desire to live forever or for great lengths of time seems to have been always part of the human spirit. And the fear of death is why we developed the notion that an essence of ourselves, which some people call the soul, lives on after our physical death. And I think that's an important thing that impels us to want to live on more. It's death is kind of inscrutable to humans, and it's hard to fathom, what does it really mean? Some might welcome death, those who've had a crappy life or are suffering from a terrible disease or feel they have already accomplished all they want to do. But I think most of us want to live longer, and some simply for their own ego, but also for these other reasons here, to enjoy life, maintain relationships with people that they like, to further their own personal growth, or just curiosity about what the future will hold. They want to live to see it. So I don't know, are there any comments on why you think we would want to live longer? Why this seems to be such a desire among people?
Maintain our experience, for one.
I think Carol was up first.
Okay.
I would like you to move your 40 to 50. The average age at menopause in civilized countries is 50, which means there are all sorts of women at age 49 having babies.
That's true, there are, but they probably should start having babies at age 15.
I'm just saying, give us the
Absolute
extra
fact.
10 years.
Yeah.
My girlfriend had a daughter at 14, was healthy, and she had a kid at 17, and they were still young when their kids were gone, so not a bad thing.
Yeah, these days people do live longer, reproduce later. In the old days, like Romeo and Juliet, how old was she? 13? I don't know. They got it together much sooner.
And I have a comment on the why would we want to live? My dad lived to be 99, was healthy. The doctor who came and visited him saw a doctor about 4 or 5 times in his life, other than ear infections. And the doctor finally said, "Don, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just getting old and worn out." And what my dad told me about getting older and dying was that, Dean, at some point, you will not be able to stand the planet that we live on, the culture, and you will look forward to checking out. And at 78, I'm already feeling some of that, but I haven't given up completely yet. As in, it's a world that you don't recognize. It's like when you move the furniture around and the cats get all upset, yeah, okay, I'll put my hand out.
Yeah, I can see that point. Some people welcome change. Keeps things interesting, and some.
I like to think I do. And when I was a hippie, I said, "Oh, I will always adopt new music," and I did it for decades. But you get your limits. I'll never be a Swiftie.
Okay, my last slide here is kind of gets into the ethics, morality of this issue. Should we increase lifespans? Aubrey de Grey, we know his view on it. He says it would be immoral not to. He said 100,000 people die every day. Well, it's actually 170,000. Maybe he meant 100,000 die before their maximum, before they need to. But about 170,000 die worldwide per day.
And maybe of age-related stuff, not counting the kids and stuff that die.
Yeah, it could be of old age. But anyway, that's a lot of people to deny this kind of care to for certain reasons. Okay, here are some of the reasons, and here's the pros and cons. You'll still die anyway, so why prolong it? But you know, that type of reasoning does not stop us from wanting to be cured of a nasty disease or anything. We want to get rid of it and keep living. So if you view death as like a disease, then this type of reasoning doesn't really apply. Someone mentioned a little earlier, it just could get too boring. Well, I think for most people, their desires change over time. I mean, Dean, your taste in music changed for a while at least. Maybe when you get older, you get more curmudgeonly or something and don't want to change. But if you live longer, maybe that time frame will change too. And so,
by the way, if I can interject, my dad chose to become legally blind and legally deaf. He was still on the internet every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can get enhancements to help you see and hear things. Yeah. Another argument is that treatments to increase longevity are not egalitarian, that only the rich would benefit. Well, I think that's probably true at first, but as we've seen with most technologies, at least, it has a way of becoming democratized. Everyone has a cell phone now, for example. Even people who can't afford a TV. So I think is a temporary situation, and I think as who was it? One of the previous videos, they were showing how much it costs to sequence the first genome, and how many orders of magnitude in just 15 years that came down to about $1,000 to get your whole genome sequenced. I think the same thing would happen with these types of longevity treatments too. Here's probably, these last two are probably the ones that I think have the most force. It could lead to social stagnation and reduce their adaptability. People who live a long time may become very set in their ways. And the last point, because people stick around so long, we would have to reduce the birth rate to avoid overpopulation. And there are ramifications of that. It would, let's see, what was I? Confirmation bias is one outcome of that. People will become more ingrained in how they think, possibly. And this could lead to less scientific advancement, an ingrained power structure, an ingrained mistaken or irrelevant moral code. People will possibly not want to change. So we get social stagnation, vulnerability to extinction threats, individual well-being could be jeopardized, and as I mentioned just a minute ago, moral advancement could be impeded. People get stuck in their moralities because of this confirmation bias. So There are some other unintended consequences I didn't get on this screen. There may be, as I mentioned, there may be unintended consequences. There often are with any new technologies. The question is, do the risks outweigh the benefits? If you're benefiting 100,000 people a day, maybe the benefits outweigh the risks. Because after all, according to some people, the world is already going to hell in a handbasket. So it can't get much worse.
It's always been there.
And some people would think maybe wanting to live longer is kind of arrogant, unseemly. But this is science. It's always going to challenge the status quo. So I think there's really no stopping it.
Yeah.
And the last idea is that aging is not a disease. But we're getting to the point, as Aubrey de Grey pointed out, if it's reversible, which we're getting to, maybe it is a disease and should be cured.
Mm-hmm.
So I see a few hands up. And Carol, you're always first in line.
Clever of me.
Mm-hmm.
I am reminded of the fact that theoretical physicists invariably do their best work under 30. And if we had an academic population of theoretical physicists who were reaching the age of 200, I think this would, there was Einstein or Einstein's equivalent saying, nah, this new guy's worth is ridiculous. There are all these really greats at the age of 200 saying, no, we don't want to pursue that theory. It's silly.
That happens now, actually.
But it would happen more so.
It could be. Yeah, that's one of the things I mentioned, less scientific advancement
Yeah.
because of this confirmation bias. You're stuck in this one way of thinking. Yeah, I agree. That's a possibility. Jason.
Population size never be a problem amongst an immortal society. And it might not be a problem for even an immortal society for too much longer. This is for several reasons, and I won't go into too much of it, but if we were to stop having children altogether in the far future and the whole world was functionally, biologically immortal, the human species would be facing near extinction in about 10,000 years. The reason being is that even if you were biologically immortal, all things considered, even if you're a safe, prudent person,
Yeah.
you're going to get squashed like a bug or fall from the sky or something within about 10,000 years or less, probability-wise. You're not going to be able to come back. They're not going to be able to hook the battery jumper cables up to you and shock you back to life, or even with nanotechnology, it's just there's not going to be enough of you left to reanimate. So there's that. And if you think of the sheer pace of our progress in terms of our technology, the boundaries we will be pushing in terms of colonization of Mars and even planets further out or celestial bodies, we will be spreading ourselves thin in terms of biological immortals. And perhaps at that period of time, the only functional, real, unupgraded humans left will be the Amish people who never got the transhumanistic upgrades. And so people will always be encouraged to procreate, even if it's in the old-fashioned way, but their demand will always outstrip production when it comes to having children in the far future. And like I said, I won't go into some of the sociological reasons why that trend is going sharply downward. A lot of the research is quite controversial and not well accepted among many academic circles. Thank you.
Well, one of my points there is it could increase our vulnerability to extinction threats. But if we become a spacefaring species, I think once we're at the point where we're trying to colonize other places, people are going to want to have kids. It's like the farmers, you know, they needed kids to help them with chores.
Well, think 3 steps forward for a moment. The very technology necessary to reanimate a person preclude that by that point we actually do have that kind of spacefaring technology. You're not going to achieve computers before you invent the light bulb.
So you're saying the way to colonize is to go into suspended animation during the trip or something? I'm not sure what you're saying.
No, I'm saying that by the time the ability to thaw people out, we're going to have spacefaring technology. We're going out to the edges of the solar system at the very least.
Possible. Yeah, we'll see how well we do with the moon and Mars first.
We went from the Wright brothers taking off Cape Hatteras to the moon in less than a century. Think about that.
Yep. Yeah, we
And
can
how long has it been since the last moon landing?
Exactly. And it's taken us 50, 75 years to get back. I call that devolution, not evolution.
All curves are S curves.
Yeah. Okay, Stan.
I merely want to discuss the idea of the second slide you showed where the United States was not keeping up with other countries in terms of their longevity. The profitability for the vices that Americans are addicted to, sugar, tobacco, and other things like that. It's just such a great business. And I can't believe that people who are in tobacco industry back when the day where you can drive around and see countless people on taking breaks just to smoke their cigarette when it's 25 degrees below zero and think, oh, I think that's a great way for me to make money. That somehow, and even Warren Buffett is proud of the fact that he owns Coca-Cola and Dairy Queen. I have to admit, I'm a sucker for Dairy Queen myself. And I used to work for Coca-Cola and I used to love to drink it. I could drink it as fast as you can believe, or Dr. Pepper. And I think it's a youth thing, but the bottom line is that all of these things that are making so much money for certain people is when you get on the other side of their healthcare programs, they're not, those people that profited on that are not willing to give them back any of that financial wherewithal to extend their life and their health. So it's a kind of, for those of us who have figured it out, don't do that, it's kind of like we're on program, but the vast number of people are not, and that's sad.
Yeah, it's a matter of which lifestyle you choose, and if you want to be a victim of those corporations, that's the way it is. By the way, the government still subsidizes tobacco growers.
Yeah.
That's how Al Gore's family made their fortune.
H-Town.
You muted, Tom.
Silly thing. Carol's thing about invention under 30 is interesting, but some people go and they have a business and they change to doing something else. And some of those people are equally creative in this second or third career. So I wonder if it's not so much calendar age as changing circumstances or changing exposure to ideas. Anyway, but the reason I had my hand up is that next week the GPS died. We don't know who did it. Could have been the Chinese, could have been an accident by us, could have been the Russians, but all the GPS and GPPOS and the AGOPS all gone. Where are you? How do you navigate to the shore without just driving in one direction and running into it? How do you get to your port? How do you get to your house? How do you navigate now without GPS? I mean, I have a sextant over here and I know how to use it.
That's hard to use while you're driving.
But it's hard to use while you're driving. It's even harder to use while you're flying. And all in all, it's not that accurate. I mean, a good set of sites will get you within a mile or two of your harbor. And after that, you do other things.
So this is next week's presentation?
Next week, GPS died. What comes next?
So
Is that actually going to be your presentation next week?
That's my presentation.
Lovely, thank you.
We really depend on those satellites.
And there are, at the moment, there isn't, I'll kill it right now. There's lots of people trying, but there's not really much that's actually completed and available for sale. Most of this stuff is still in the lab.
Hey, Dean, you're up.
Hello, I'm up. Yeah, so when I was traveling in my motorhome all over the country, I always had an atlas. And when I'm at home, well, I don't have one, but I have a friend that has one. I can call him. He always has a Thomas Brothers under his driver or passenger seat. Because what happens if you can't find your way around? And my brother was a sailor and out to sea, as in Catalina, I mean, offshore. And yeah, how do you find the harbor? Well, I mean, there's lighthouses, there's celestial navigation, there's, in other words, people, long before GPS, if I recall, people were sailing around the globe.
I still have road maps in my car, but I rarely use them.
Yep.
Yeah, I would go to any town I was going to be in for 2 weeks or a month. I'd pick up a local map. Absolutely.
David.
Thanks very much. This was a good presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to hear more topics on. Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Hey, Eric, did you have your hand up?
Yes, it keeps going off, but well, first of all, as to what Carol said about the loss of really top level creativity and innovation over 30. Well, the brain, not coincidentally, starts to age by 30, and the people, contrary to popular current mythology and religious, the people that do the most important innovations at Nobel level and above are at the 99.99 percentile and above. And it doesn't take much at all of deterioration due to brain damage to knock one out of that rarefied thing. And secondly, with in the civilized countries, birth rates are dropping so rapidly now below replacement that for at least the next couple of decades, it's critical to increase the health span and the work span where people can efficiently and happily and productively work longer to avoid being inundated with a top-heavy hordes of basically enfeebled old parasites. Just to keep the economies going, we'll have to increase the health span and work life.
Yeah, I think I did a presentation a month or two ago on brain elasticity and AI, and I think there are ways being developed to keep us sharp for longer.
One would be getting rid of all the plastics in the environment and metal cans. Most of our food is stored or heated at some point in plastics or metal cans or. And it's,
I refuse to cook in plastic.
Right.
And who exactly is going to make that happen?
That's a good question. Since we are in fact a lobbyocracy, there are things that are well known, like red number 3 dye. It's in a lot of the foods aimed at especially kids. It's known to be carcinogen. But now they finally, after much to do, they're going to, I think, phase it out in 2027.
Wait, plastics not only saved my life, it saved many people's lives here. And plastic products have greatly expanded and enhanced the quality
not
of
all.
most
Plastics aren't all bad, but you got to be careful about getting them into your body.
Looking at you through my plastic irises.
But microplastics in the body can create cancer and things like that. So there are pluses and minuses.
Yeah, we got to be more careful with them in summary, to oversimplify.
The wholesale demonization of plastics is overly simplistic. We wouldn't even be meeting right now if we didn't have plastic devices in our hands.
We're not eating them, hopefully.
It's greatly expanded our quality of life and the length of our lives, to say nothing of all the medical interventions that are made possible because of plastics, which all rely on the petroleum industry to make possible in the first bloody place. So,
but we do need to be much
you're
more
seeing
careful
the
with
silver
them
lining
into our
inside the
bodies.
big black cloud.
Yeah.
Well, there's always downsides and trade-offs, but you can't deny the benefits. You have to take the good with the bad, or vice versa.
I'll give the bad to somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening and sticking around.
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to stop recording.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay.
See you next week.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.